Hello, everyone. This is Monica Ramirez, Warrior of Love, and today we're in the heart of the artist talk. And today we have a very special person. He is an artist. He's a poet, and his name is Eddie Vega. Eddie Vega is a poet, spoken word artist, storyteller, and educator. His poetry has been displayed on VA bosses and downtown San Antonio building. His first full-length collection, poetry, Chicharra's Chorus, was published in 2019 by Flower Song Press, and he's in 2021 recipient of the Literary Arts Grant for the Luminaria Artist Foundation. Vega writes about food, Tejano culture, social justice, and the intersections, therefore. Known as the taco poet of Texas, he can be found in the open mic slam and taqueria on any given non-quarantine evening. Well, yes, the word have changed since 2020, and hopefully we don't get in lockdown again. Not good for the arts. And it is really my pleasure to have you here, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
And Eddie, I am an artist, I'm a poet, and we all go for different process and in this, and each one of us is different. All of the artists and each one of the medias actually are also different. And in my discovering of being a poet, I did not name myself poet until later on when I had my cultural center. But how was your process of discovering you were a poet?
Oh, that's a very good question. Because usually people ask, how long have you been writing? But they don't ask, when did you know you were a poet? And that's a very different question.
Uh-huh.
I don't think, like you, I don't think I called myself a poet right away. I waited for somebody else to do it. I thought that it would be that I didn't think that I had the right to call myself a poet until I was recognized as a poet by others. So that's part of that realization. So I love it now when people call me a poet. I feel like it's an esteemed title.
Yes, it's hard because most of the artists they teach us control your ego, so it is very hard to actually we believe in ourselves.
Yes, exactly. I still have, and I don't know if there's a diagnosis or anything, but imposter syndrome, where you think that you aren't very good at what you do, and it doesn't matter that people are telling you that you're good, because you still don't feel that you're worthy of all the accolades and all the praise. And I'm still in the middle of that. I have this great big grant that I got this year, and yet I'm still like asking people, do you mind if I read at your open mic? Is this okay? And they're like, of course you can come over and do this, but I still have to I feel a little humble asking their questions, their for their permission.
Yes, it is a process to we start embody who we are and our passion. And talking about your passions, I read that you're also a teacher, my educator, right?
Right.
And when you became a poet, and because you were a poet since before even you were named a poet to others, but when you became a poet, do you want to do this job full time, or how do you divide your creative process with your job? Because
Uh-huh.
it's a very hard one for all the
Oh
artists.
yes. Well, truthfully, I've been writing for a long time, and I've always wanted to be a writer. But my degree is in theology, and I was actually a missionary for a little bit. I was doing social justice work in Veracruz and Oaxaca.
Mm.
So that was my theology focus, and I did service and I did teaching. And when I teach at a Catholic high school, and it's in theology. Um, and then 10 years ago or 11 years ago, I got divorced. And then I had all this time and alone. So that's when I really started the poetry and I started the writing. And um, in that, so that when my students first knew me, I was just the teacher. I was their religion teacher, their theology teacher. And then a few years after that, uh, um, then all of a sudden I was the poet who is also a teacher.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes I compartmentalize it and sometimes I don't. So that sometimes in the classroom, I share poems, even though it's not a poetry or really an English class, but I share poems that are relevant. I have my students do assignments that are basically poetry. I have them do haiku about their service experiences. I have them do um, what are they called? The name escapes me right now, but I have them do poems where they have to describe something, and I give them a line limit and whatnot. Um, I have them describe themselves. Sometimes I have an assignment where you have to describe yourself as a recipe. What's the recipe of yourself, of who you are? That's basically a poem. So I've incorporated some of the poetry into the classroom. And then as far as my creative process, my students are inspiration all the time. Their stories, their struggles, um, a lot of that I think finds its way. What I would like to tell them, I think, as advice as young people, that all filters into the poetry. Um, but I really do see I see poetry everywhere. So there's lots of inspiration in a lot of different places that I pick up on, and somehow it makes it into the classroom eventually.
Yeah, I can see that. I was teaching a while back Spanish, and yes, I incorporate poetry in there. And well, I we all have rituals for our creative process.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter you're a painter or a musician or a poet or a dancer, whatever. We all have different rituals, and they're all different because we're all unique.
Uh-huh.
What is your
My ritual.
your ritual?
No, I'm at my desk and I have this empty bottle because I ritualized using Mexican Coca-Cola uh, as part of my writing process. I feel I have to have caffeine, but specifically this caffeine. This particular type of caffeine is the one that I'm looking for, and this particular type of sugar. And I get to my computer, and that's when I start creating. That could be now. That's not always the actual. I don't just get to the computer and start writing. Usually, it's this is when I get to the computer. It's because I'm writing it down. I'm editing. I'm putting something together, and I work with. Um, I have at least one Coca-Cola Mexicana while I'm doing that, and right now I have sweet tea because I run out of Coke. But the my process, I guess, starts with a line, something that it's interesting. I listen to people all the time. The people here in San Antonio are my biggest muses. Their conversations that they have, things that I just pick up at the grocery store, sometimes even the parking lot of the grocery store. I go to Woodlawn Lake, this park that's very close to my house, and I listen to people. I watch people, um, and everything about it is just very beautiful to me. The way that our culture, or the way that I see our culture, still out there in the people, and a lot of that is what I write about. And I put a little note down in my phone if I don't have my journal, especially, but I put a note in my phone. And my notes app is full of just lines, and sometimes I remember why I wrote it down, and sometimes I don't, and eventually those flow into becoming a poem, something creative after that.
Yeah, for me, they come like little phrases or little things, and it will not let me go. Even I'm driving, and oh,
Uh-huh.
and I can't let it go. So I just grab the phone, record it, So then I can breathe and I can continue driving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of people, they see me staring. My friends, when we're hanging out, they'll see me staring into space. And that's because I'm thinking of that line. I'm thinking of what I'm going to write, put it down, and I'm just observing. And they've learned to just leave me alone. And then come back. Then I can breathe and go back to the conversation.
That's one of my questions that I was going to ask you about our relationships with others. As an artist, it was easy for me to deal with artists because we were all in a creative mood sometimes. Like okay, they just get I had a cultural center in here, McAllen, Texas. So sometimes you can find them, I don't know, in a napkin doing some drawings or doing some poetry, or someone gets with a guitar and start jamming in there. And um and the regular people that are not artists, for them it was very weird, to be around any of us. So I came to my understanding too, it was easy for me to be around artists, and now I am a coach, and now around or coaches or people that are like that, or artists, than being around regular people, because for them we're too weird. Or what is your experience for
We
you?
are weird, and a good weird. So I've enjoyed my time being an artist here in the city. Today is second Saturday, which is when we have the art walk, the second art walk. We have first Friday, but then first Friday got too much of a party scene, so then they created second Saturday, and that's when the artists go and hang out, see each other's artwork, and I've already planned a few days out of going there to go hang out with my brother and sister and fellow artists. Um, because of that, my regular, I would say, I hate to say regular friends, but my non-artist friends, I've known them for a long time. My good friends, we've been through a lot together. They knew me before I was a poet and an artist. Um, so we have different conversations about different things, and they give me the space, and they're very, very supportive of my work, and they buy my books, even the little chapbooks that I sell on my own. So that's always, I've always enjoyed that about my friends. um, and then my family, um, my parents, my sister are very, very supportive of me, and now my significant other, my girlfriend, also very, very supportive of the art. She actually found me through the poetry scene, so she's very supportive of that too. Um, but yeah, the conversations are a little bit different, and I have to remember sometimes that I am not around creatives when I'm around my non-creative friends. Um, so we see the world a little bit different, and just talk about different things.
You mentioned that you were divorced and now you have a girlfriend. I noticed that the creative process when we're heartbroken or when we're in love is how it works for you.
Oh yeah, I told her I don't know that we can be together because then I won't have anything to write about. I need to be disappointed and heartbroken, and that's the only way I can create. And she didn't like that answer, of course, but and so I actually asked a lot of friends. I asked other creative people what they thought about that, and they wouldn't say much about it. But the best answer that I got was from one of my mentors, Jesse Cardona, who said that our art begins with some sort of discontent.
Or content when you're so in love.
You could say, yeah, that's what my girlfriend was saying. Well, maybe you'll be inspired to write other things. I'm like, well, yes, that's true. Um, but I like the idea of the discontent because I could still be in love, but I could be discontent. It doesn't have to be about just romantic feelings, because I'm often discontent with the world around us, and it's not. I'm discontent about our government, or discontent about the weather, or global warming, or anything else out there that just is something that I feel I need to express, starting with this form. So it's a shift for me because I'm not writing the heartbroken poetry anymore, or the dissatisfied love life poetry, I'm now I'm writing about different things, putting things together.
I remember in Art Awakenings, where in my cultural center that I have, in fact, Chris Carmona worked for me. He was one of my assistants in there.
No,
And
it's Jesse Cardona, not Chris Carmona.
I'm sorry. Then I got confused with the Carmonas. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
He's also a poet. He's also a writer. Well, in that time we had poetry slams, and it was a lot of fun that time when we had poetry slams.
Mhm.
That was in the 2004 or something like that. And but how I've been disconnected from that scene for a long time.
Mhm.
Uh, how is in San Antonio? Working up, you see, it was a because it was fun. I don't know, it continue being fun. In that
Uh-huh.
time, we have the poetry slam in HBO, and that time
Okay.
when I started, but now is not anymore in HBO or nothing like that. So how is now the scene as a poetry slam? It is easy for the poets. It continue as fun as it used to be, or
I
and
yeah.
remember that we have many spectators right now. They're gonna be seeing us that they don't know what is a poetry slam.
Okay.
Can you also explain them, please?
Sure, sure. So we have poetry open mic, which is when you just go and you express yourself. You have a poem you want to read. The mic is open to anyone. A poetry slam is a competition, and that's the biggest difference. Is that you can read any poem you want at a poetry slam, but you're going to be judged, and you have a parameter of 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and also you can't use any props, right? So the artistic poem that you might find at the open mic may not work to affect a crowd because you want to affect as many people. Well, you want to affect the judges that are judging you, but really the entire crowd. So that's the biggest difference. Poetry slam poets are spoken word poets usually. That's how we would distinguish ourselves. Um, I don't like to call myself a slam poet. I call myself a poet that does slam. Um,
Mhm.
but I do find a lot spoken word, and I'm trying to transition actually from just spoken word to also being a book poet, someone who writes. Because I have a book, and I'm trying to work. I'm working on another book. Um, but as far as the scene goes, we have a slam in San Antonio. It's a lively scene still. We big before the pandemic, of course, we had a lot more traveling poets, spoken word artists, slam poets who would come into town for a feature. Sometimes they can bring and draw in a crowd because of their name, because people in the community or people in the scene know who they are. And I was a part of that. I was a part of bringing them in. When we transitioned into the pandemic, we transitioned into a scene where we could now go anywhere because it was virtual. And I got to be a featured artist in Albuquerque and in Charlotte, and different places around the country because of that. And then, personally, I was part of an interview show, a little bit like this, where we interviewed poets as like a little podcast. Um, so that's how the scene is still lively. I actually sit on the board of the Southern Fried Poetry Slam, and it's the longest running poetry slam in the country. We're heading into our 28th, 29th year, and with the exception of 2020, there's been a regional slam which takes place over 3 to 4 days, usually somewhere in the South. My first time going was in Little Rock. We were in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I'm sorry, Fayetteville, North Carolina, in Greensboro, in Louisville, Kentucky, and we got to host it in 2018. We hosted it here in San Antonio. So then the slam scene and the spoken word scene remembered who we were in San Antonio, and they would come and they'd come through and feature at our venues, and some of them slept on my couches. So it's a very it's a very good community, I think. Um, we talk, of course, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, um, and so we kind of keep in touch with each other as artists. in that sense.
That is good. Because something that I do notice between the community of artists in almost all the world. I'm not gonna say only poets or only painters or only musicians. There is a lot of competition and a lot of friction between them. Why you think is that?
I think it's part of the creative process. And I kind of remember, and I guess earlier when you asked about talking to other creatives, if I'm being honest, I have now gotten to the point where I have creative differences with other artists, and that maybe leads to the friction of other. You're at the same place, and you acknowledge each other because you have respect, but that's as far as it's gonna go, and um, and it ebbs and flows. I remember there was a poet who sometimes didn't talk to me, who now hugs me. So it kind of goes because and there's some pettiness. I heard the story of, who was it? I think it was Archibald MacLeish, or this poet who was reading at the same time as Robert Frost. They were at the same reading, and Robert Frost was very upset that he was reading before this other poet. He wanted to read at the end. He thought himself the headliner. So when the other poet was doing his reading, Robert Frost actually lit a trash can on fire.
Oh wow!
To take away the attention. And so when I go around town sometimes and I see some of the competitiveness and the pettiness that we have, I kind of think of that story, and I think we're not much different, but we're not that extreme either. We're not gonna hopefully go and light a trash can on fire. But yeah, I think that for whatever reason that just exists. I think that, and I've looked at other artists, painters and sculptors in the Renaissance, and they were very petty towards each other and very competitive. And then they're probably because they were competing for the same contract, the same money, for commissions. And that happens now too. I hear, I don't necessarily feel this way. I like to support each other, but I know that sometimes I've been unfriended on Facebook by other artists who said, well, why did he get that? Why did he get that award, or why did he get that bid? And what can you do if you don't get it? I mean, there's going to be 50 people applying, and only one person can get it. What do? You're going to be mad at that one person every time? That just doesn't. I don't think that's very healthy.
Yes, and we're all different. Like I have mentioned several times in different interviews that even if we get a theme to paint or to write about, we're all going to paint it different, and we're going to all write it different. We all have our own way to express ourselves, and it doesn't matter with the media. So in reality, we're all unique.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to copy someone else or try to live for someone else, that's when you use your uniqueness, and that's when you're going to go into competition. That's my point of view.
And you can't emulate. You can't be copying. You can't. I mean, you can always borrow from people, because I think that we're all in the same creative atmosphere. I know sometimes I read something and I think, that doesn't sound like the normal rhythm in which I read a poem. Why was that? And then I'll hear another poet. I'm like, oh, that's what it was. I was listening to that poet and I caught their rhythm, and that's why this poem came out this way. But yeah, we react to each other. That's why I enjoy the open mic and the slam scene, because I go and I get inspired. They write about something in some way and I think, maybe not. And then the same thing happens to me. I have a poem. Let me start. There was a guy up on the stage who did a poem in the form of a resolution, where he kept saying the word whereas, right? Whereas we have now noticed, etc. Whereas, and I sat back there and I thought it was funny, and I thought, well, instead of whereas, I'm gonna say whereas. So I wrote a poem about whereas, right? And I didn't mean to write it about fair-skinned Latinas. I was writing about white women, right? And then, but I read it a couple of times, and then a fair-skinned Latina woman heard it, and she was a little offended by the güeras because she's a güera, and she wrote her poem about güeras, and etc. And then I stopped doing my poem about güeras because I was like, no, maybe I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have gone there. But yeah, that's how we do it. We learn from each other. We build from each other.
And something I was reading in your bio that you can inspire your poetry through food.
Oh yes.
And explain me a little bit more why I
Food.
love food, but how it got the inspiration. Is it tacos or what it is?
Food is because food is culture. Food is family. Food is the best that we have in life. That the myrrh or the nectar that the gods eat. That's what we eat is our food, right? Our ambrosia or whatever. It's our food. And how many times have you had something that you bit into that was just so beautiful, right? That just tasted so well. And then how many times did you taste something so well, so good, that it reminded you of another time? That it reminded you of how your mother made it or your grandmother made it, or a certain restaurant you went to at a certain point in your life. And so food, that food is very, very inspiring. And I think especially in our Mexican American culture, I started writing a little bit about tacos, and then eventually it got out of hand. And there's more about the taco than just the taco. A taco is a political statement now. A taco is it is a cultural statement. It is a geographic statement. It's more than just a taco. And that's when I say I write about food, people think, oh, it's just okay. That's kind of funny. But I think, I had a whole workshop. I do a workshop on food poetry. And I asked them to write not just about the food, but write about your favorite meal. What was your favorite meal? And why is it your favorite meal? And somebody wrote about Fred's Fish Fry. I don't know if you're familiar with Fred's Fish Fry here in San Antonio. It's this little chain that they sell fried fish. And it doesn't have a very good reputation. People don't like going to Fred's Fish Fry, but it's cheap, right? Mm-hmm. And they make fun of it. And this girl said, when we grew up poor, but the one treat that we had is that once a month, my dad would bring home a whole big box of Fred's Fish Fry. And it wasn't great, but it was a great time to be together. We were all sharing in that. And it was the experience that my dad brought this all for us. And it totally transformed this idea of this little franchise here in town. So yeah, there's so much more that we can write about regarding our food.
That is true. That is true. And then I wanted to ask you also, I have several questions that I don't forget that I write it down. And also obviously you talk about it has to do with politics that you also write, and also Tejano culture, social justice. I'm sorry, that's what you said. Social justice. Those are your themes, your main themes, right?
Yeah.
How you get inspired about that?
Of how do I get inspired about the Tejano culture? Well, I mean that goes with the food part too. I think it took a long time for me to recognize that I am not a Mexicano because I was born in McAllen, and I've lived in South Texas most of my life. So I can't, but I am an American citizen, so you could say I'm Mexican American. But I think that I most identify myself as being a Tejano, a South Texan, somebody who has a Mexican cultural background, who can speak Spanish, but when he speaks Spanish, it's not always correct. It's it's a little pocho. And then when I speak English, people say that I speak with an accent. So when I finally have put that all together and have a sense of pride about my identity, I say that it's Tejano. So it's more than just like a genre of music. Um, it's the fact that our enchiladas have yellow cheese on them, and that's okay. And that our our tacos come on flour tortillas, and that's the way that we have them. And if I want to have a taco with corn tortilla, that's going to be okay too. And if I want to have breakfast tacos, I can do that. And people up north, they call them burritos, but we're going to call them breakfast tacos.
All the north of Mexico is actually more flour tortillas, and the center to south is the corn tortillas.
Right, exactly. I think that's then, and that's how I. That's also like I guess part of the distinctions that are made is that when people say authentic Mexican food, well, it's only authentic to the region where they come from.
Yeah.
And they don't see the other regions. So when you say I'm going to have barbacoa for the northern Mexican, that means the head of the cow that's steamed overnight in a hole in the ground and eaten in the morning at breakfast, etc. But I lived in Veracruz, and when they said barbacoa, sometimes it was mutton and sometimes it was goat, because barbacoa is a method, it's not a meat.
But they do it in
People
different
think
ways.
it.
I was raised in Veracruz,
Uh-huh.
and they do chicken. I have tried barbacoa of chicken. I have tried of even of rabbit.
Yes,
It's
yes, exactly. And then if you ask the average person along the border here what barbacoa is, and you tell them that you had it with chicken, they're gonna look at you like you're wrong, right?
yeah.
And you know that you're right, because it's different, because it's according to our own experience and to our own like regional background. So when we say enchiladas, for example,
Mhm.
I've had enchiladas in Mexico that were rolled. Some of them were folded. Some of them had a sauce on top. Some of them only had onions on top. They had all different types of cheese, different types of fillings, all these different things. And when we say enchiladas in South Texas, sometimes they're on a red tortilla with chile con carne on top of it. And then we get made fun of because, oh, those aren't enchiladas. Well, how are they not as much as enchilada as the other ones? Because you all have very, very different kinds of enchiladas. They're not exactly like the one that you in particular are thinking of.
Well, I would like to ask you. I know it's very hard to be an artist and be and survive as an artist, and more in poetry books. I've been working with a poetry book for a long, long time, and then I put it in the side because I thought, who's gonna buy it? My
Uh-huh.
family, my friends, and that's it. And if I right now I did publish another book that is more for self-help with other co-authors, and is one of the bestsellers right now in Amazon. And people are buying it, people that I don't even know. I even wrote it with people in Canada, and no problem. But the way of a poet or a painter is very different than when you're writing for a novel or self-help or things like that. Is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And how you have find the way to survive as an artist, because I don't how you envision yourself also at the same time in 5 years. Would you want to continue having two jobs, because
Oh,
I been or just being
yes,
an
no,
artist
it's been hard
or
being a teacher and an artist, because I want to create more and I want to do this full time. But
Mhm.
I don't know that my art is at a moment where I can do that, where I can survive off just my art. So I have to teach because that's a steady income and it gives me healthcare, right? But it may be in 5 years. By then, hopefully, I'll have another degree, one where I can teach the art, where I can teach writing or poetry, and have the time to be creating more. So hopefully, in five, and then that's about a 5 year plan, I think. How do I survive now? Well, teaching doesn't pay much either, so the art supplements, you know, um, and I have to do it's a hustle because we have to do different things. I host an open mic that pays me a little bit of money for hosting. Sometimes I got a commission from the city, and I did a poem for an art feature. I don't think, actually, I'm not allowed to say yet what it was, but I got a commission from the city, so I was able to get some money for that. And sometimes people, schools will hire poets for a day, for a few hours, to present and to read at their campus. So that is part of it. And my book sales, I guess, is not that big, because poetry is the least lucrative of all of the genre of literature out there. I made some books at Christmas myself, and I just put on Facebook. I put a picture on Instagram, and I made 20 copies of this book, thinking, hey, if anybody wants this for their Christmas, I've got a book of poems for you. And then I ended up having to go back to Kinko's and make more copies, like 10 times. And I ended up selling, like, I don't know, $1,100 worth of this little book.
That is
So, and that one wasn't published by, I don't get any credit on Amazon for that, because it was self-made, self-published. So I'm not on a big seller list, of any sort. My other book, through Flower Song Press, that one has sales that maybe I go to a feature somewhere and people notice me, and then they go look it up, and then they buy it. But it's very, very, very different. But hopefully in 5 years, like I said, I'll be able to make enough off my speaking and my poetry to be able to thrive.
Can you tell our spectators how hard it is to publish a book, and how long it would take you to write a book?
A book? Oh, that. Well, I feel like I was writing my first book like all my life. There are poems there that were for a long time, and I finally collected them, and I got frustrated by the process of sending them out for contests and then not winning. And when I finally put my manuscript together and I sent it to Flower Song, and Edward Vidare emailed me and said, yes, we can publish you. And I'm like, oh, wow. So the process starts. The first part was just writing the book, putting the poems together, which took several years. The next part of the process is the editing, the copy editing. It was a good 6-8 months after that first email, maybe a year, after we actually put it together and put it in a format that we all agreed on. Because I had another friend, Jo Reyes Boitel. She was the editor on it. She gave it her eye. She had to, she recommended that I place certain poems in different orders in the book, because there's something to that. You can't just put them all in there. And that was, which one are going to be first, which is going to be last. You have to get blurbs, from people to write about your book and give recommendations. So it was a long process. I'm thinking that the next book is not going to take as long, because I already went through it with the first one.
I have a question that many of authors or many people that are considering to actually publishing a book, they have this question: what would you recommend better, an editorial like the one of the Flower Song Press, or Amazon? What it would be?
Depends on what you want. You can self-publish. I have some self-published books through Amazon, or now it's called Kindle Direct, I think it's called now. And there are other groups out there where you can self-publish. And that's very, very quick turnaround. You do it yourself. You have all of the control. But that also means that you have all of the blame. So if you didn't get someone to look over your book, and you have misspellings, or you have bad line breaks, or your formatting was off, well, that's all on you. When you have a publisher, they usually have somebody else to help out with that process. The other thing that the publisher has that Amazon doesn't is, for better or for worse, is a network and a place to where put your book at a library, to put it at in a bookstore, to take it with them to a conference, to sell more books of yours. All of that can happen with a publisher. If you do it through Amazon, you have to do all of that yourself. And some people can do that. And some people are very good at that self-promotion. I am not very good at that. I'm not a business person. I'm a writer. So I need somebody else to do that for me. And then, my publisher is a small independent press, which means it doesn't have that big network of what we call book slanging, but it does, it is getting bigger. There are bigger presses that will have that network for you. And if you want to submit to them, then go for it. The sky's the limit, But I started with a little independent press, and I like the idea of staying with them for a little while longer. Eventually, if your book is really good and it's picked up, then one of the bigger presses will pick it up from your little independent press. That hasn't happened to me, but I know that it's out there, that it's happened to some people.
That is true. You are teaching right now some creative classes of poetry?
Right this moment, no. I did a residency for 10 days in Maine about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then I was the tournament director for the for the Southern Fried Poetry Slam. And because of those two big events, I didn't have a class. I didn't start a class, or I didn't volunteer to teach a class or anything like that at the
Do you have something planned for the future?
For the future, I'm not at the moment, unless somebody in the viewing audience wants to hire me, and let me know. I am available. At the moment, I have a new position at a new it's not a new school, I'm sorry, but I have a new position at another school, not the same one that I was before. So I have to worry about that. And my biggest project right now is an anthology of books written in Tejano Spanglish. And I'm working on that until March, or that's my deadline. So hopefully I'm working on that only till December, so I can finish it. But that's really the big thing. And there might not be a lot of room or time for a big class, maybe a workshop here and there. But yeah, I have that project to work on.
And I would love to ask you, you can make us the favor to read us one of your poems.
Sure. Let me bring that up. This one is called Career Exploration. In 7th grade, we had a class called Career Exploration. We were encouraged to explore different paths in life, to find out what our place might be in the workforce. We took vocational tests, aptitude tests, and vocational aptitude tests. Given results and told, you can make excellent auto mechanics, grocers, retail sales clerks, infantry soldiers. And if you try real hard, boys and girls, maybe someday you could be managers. Our field trip was to McDonald's. They showed us how they make them Big Macs so fast, how they build those boxes to put them in. And before we left, they made sure that we knew how to punch the time clock. When Ms. Grimley asked what our parents did, we hesitated before saying things like, he fixes cars, she works at Kmart, he drives a truck. What Ms. Grimley didn't know was that our parents were actually engineers, accountants, psychiatrists, teachers. They crossed the border with knowledge and experience, but had to leave their degrees and credentials behind. My father was a teacher, but he exchanged his white collar for a blue one to get a green card. The only time I ever saw him in the classroom was when he visited as a parent, listening to teachers talk to him as if he didn't know anything about pedagogy. He stood in silence despite having so much to say. My father was the most well-educated toll collector on the international border, traded desks in rows for cars in columns. His podium turned into a cash register. He asked people to pay $1 instead of attention. Our immigrant parents left opportunities for themselves to find better ones for their families. They took the jobs Americans didn't want so their kids could take whatever jobs they wanted. Our immigrant parents started us on a path to their American dream. My father stopped being a teacher so that I could be one.
That is beautiful.
Thank you.
I really like it. Thank you very much. Well, would you like to add something else so the people can find you if they want to hire you for poetry readings?
Or whatever, yeah. Do you mind if I put it in the chat and then like, I mean, I'll read it out loud, but then if you want to copy it later,
Yes, I will put it in the description for so like that people can contact you. You can contact and so that people know they can contact you for any event they have, or if they want to do a poetry read now that we're not in lockdown.
yeah.
Now they can hire any of the poets.
Yes.
Or
I call myself El Tacolico on Twitter and Instagram, the Tacoholic, and then to be consistent, I have the Gmail, eltacolico@gmail.com. And I'm working on, I don't have a website. My website is down at the moment, so I'm gonna have to work on that.
then you're working in an anthology you mentioned too.
Yes, the anthology is called Asina is How We Talk.
Okay.
And I'm collecting poems from South Texas poets, and some of them are South Texas expatriates. They're from South Texas, but they moved somewhere else. I'm trying to get them back. Carmen Tafoya has agreed to write the prologue or the foreword, and the introduction, I guess. And I've got some others who are excited and wanting to contribute to it. So it'll have some poets that are very recognized and some who are totally new. But a broad range and a range of topics, but all of it written in a mix of language.
Yes, I believe that's part of the zone for the spectators, because this is going to be transmitted all around the world. We're
Sure.
going to have a lot of people from New Zealand and things like that. This are going to be listening to this. And the zone where we are, South Texas, considered from San Antonio here, is English and Spanish, and this is part of our culture where we are. My parents are from San Antonio, so yes. And would you like something else to add before I give the announcements?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about my art. And I really enjoyed being in this art world and being a creative person. And I want to keep creating. That's my goal, and to keep informing people about our culture, which I think is very, very beautiful and very necessary to be expressed. So yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for accepting my invitation. And the next tomorrow, we're gonna be airing out on Sunday 6 Eddie, and on the 7th, if I'm not Monday in Soul Talk, we're gonna have Leonora Piffer. She is a sound alchemist and light code frequency anchor for the new earth. And the next week, on Sunday, in the Heart of the Artist Talk, we're going to have Victoria Fono, that she is also a poet from San Antonio too.
Yes, I know she's, yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much to everyone. And my name is Monica Ramirez, Warrior of Love, and we are in the Heart of the Artist Talk. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
And